I don't know about you, but right now I tend to focus a lot more on rookies than I do other positions. I tend to focus on um maybe like mid-range teams more than I do super high-end or low-end teams. I'm trying to figure out like where the big question marks are, like the things that we don't know yet that feel like they could move. Like I'm not checking on the Chiefs training camp updates all the time, right? Like aside from maybe what their pass catchers look like and who's still healthy. I've had a rough week in that department. We're looking for signal here. Think of it as a viewer's guide for training camp to help us cut through the noise because, Sam, there is a ton of noise at this time of year.
Yeah, just speaking from experience in college when I was in training camp, the most fascinating part was always these first couple days because you could get a sense on the corners of who were the guys that were coming into the program who immediately were going to be impact people, and then guys that didn't fit and just weren't what you expected going into training camp. And even coming out of spring ball or in the NFL OTAs and stuff like that, you can kind of get a sense. But training camp, August, July is really the time where everything has to come together. And there's just a couple items that start poking their head out each year around this. And like you said, it's typically the rookies and typically some names that you're like, wow, I didn't really expect that.
There's definitely an okey doke that happens at this time of year, though, and it happens to a lot of us where you see like a highlight play of somebody who makes a crazy one-handed grab on the sideline, and now we're convinced that this guy's going to be a star. And then what ends up happening is that they never see the field, right? Like, so that's part of the reason that we want to have Mike and Chuck on to kind of help us figure out what actually matters and what we can look at, so that we don't tend to focus on some of the things that can maybe be a little bit of misdirection for us. What do you think has stood out to you so far that you think might actually matter?
I think just kind of the general excitement surrounding the Carolina Panthers, in particular, Tetarioa McMillan, is what I am kind of locked in on because there's a lot of insights about this Panthers team that are really interesting that came out during the offseason, the way that they're leaning into analytics, the way that they have a true plan to build a team, which typically you don't get to see in the NFL. You don't get a 2 to 3 year leeway to really build a team, and they have done that. And it's clear that they wanted to build up front. They went ahead and did that. They're getting Derek Brown, their premier player on defense, back from an unexpected injury last year. And now it feels like they just have to get the right pieces around Bryce Young. And that passing game should be the final piece of this team turning into hopefully a 500 or above team and then continuing to make jumps as we've seen teams like the Detroit Lions have looked like. I think what I really want to hear in excess of Tetarioa McMillan is looking good, he's meshing well with Bryce Young, is I want to hear about target share. I want to hear that he is commanding the ball, that he is the number one target, because I think that will give the best outlook for the Carolina Panthers this season. Right now, reports are that the ball is getting spread around. They're trying to get a lot of people involved. Adam Thielen isn't really practicing, so they're getting some more reps for the younger guys or the guys on the margins. But as we start getting into the preseason, I want to understand what Tetarioa McMillan's target share may look like in the season. That's what I'm most excited about, given early returns from Panthers camp.
Yeah, based on where they took him, he needs to be a target earner. He needs to be a guy that is
100%.
absolutely, the first read rate's very high, all of those things. I also, at this point in training camp, don't hate that the ball is being spread around because Lord knows that the rest of those guys need a lot of reps.
Definitely.
Because some of those other guys are going to have to step up also, in addition to Tet, even if he's everything. Tetarioa, sorry, my bad. His mom would be very mad at me. They don't like Tet.
T-Mac, apparently, as well. That's the other nickname.
T-Mac or Tetarioa, but not Tet, just not Tet. I have been becoming more and more intrigued with the tight end situation in Seattle, and specifically the rookie Elijah Arroyo. And I know that he's a guy and they're a rookie class that we really liked after the draft and focused on as one of maybe our favorite draft classes. So I think it probably shouldn't come as a surprise to me that that is a training camp that the rookies are kind of popping in. I have been really interested in Elijah Arroyo, also AJ Barner a little bit. He's not a rookie, but specifically the tight ends there for a number of different reasons. First of all, you've got a new outside zone blocking system. So that means that the tight end is so important there. That's where a lot of the runs are going to go, is outside the tackle and between the tight end. And so the tight end is going to have to be really good at blocking. I think that might be where the question mark is as far as Elijah is concerned so far, and maybe why I mentioned AJ Barner as being an important component there and kind of keeping an eye on the updates about him and Elijah. But what I think is so interesting about Elijah is that we've been hearing just consistent news out of Seahawks camp. Greg Bell, who covers the team and has for a long time very well, tweeting out updates about him as a pass catcher, and just the fact that we're seeing diving grabs, we're seeing, leaping grabs, and specifically the way that they're moving him around. It's so consistent with what they said after the draft. Like, I listen for signal in terms of usage and in terms of what people are saying that isn't an answer to a question, what they're volunteering, right? So there's stuff here about Elijah Arroyo right after the draft where Schneider and McDonald both mentioned that coaches on their staff thought that he could maybe play X. Like, right after the draft, that pops and you're like, what? Okay, like, they volunteered that. Now, how about this paragraph from Greg Bell? Kubiak has Arroyo playing all over the starting and second team offenses. Inline as a traditional tight end, in the slot, outside as an X receiver. Arroyo has been in motion a lot in training camp before the snap. He's been running deep seam routes, intermediate crossing routes, quick out routes. I mean, all of this feels like somebody who is going to be on the field probably a little bit, right? Like that maybe they're thinking based on their usage of him in training camp that is a draft pick that has hit for them so far. I feel like we're probably going to see a lot of 12 and maybe 22 out of Seattle. And so I'm becoming really intrigued about him.
I think when you look at Clint Kubiak and what he did with the Saints last year, and then moreover apply that to the learnings while he was at the 49ers as well and in previous stops, you look in particular at the Saints team and you think of the usage of Foster Moreau and Jawan Johnson in New Orleans, and trying to take away things from that. There was a lot of motion. Obviously, Taysom Hill also was with the Saints. He was moving those guys all over the field and trying to create easy decisions for Derek Carr and then Spencer Rattler and then Jake Haener. And they're kind of in a situation like that as well in Seattle. Obviously, a little bit more stability with Sam Darnold coming off a successful winning season with the Minnesota Vikings, now coming in to the Seahawks team. But to have a weapon like that you are already starting to play with in that manner in training camp means that once we get to week 6, week 7, week 8, he may be one of these tight ends that we talked about during draft season, Lindsay, about how deep this draft class was and how there may be some surprises from the day 2 to day 3 ranges of guys that can just immediately contribute due to that depth of the tight end position. And I think early returns are showing that if Arroyo can play all those positions, especially in an offense where Kubiak loves pre-snap motion, he likes to hit easy buttons for his quarterbacks, and they're probably going to be running the ball and utilizing misdirection before the snap a lot, Arroyo can be a big contributor to this offense, both in the pass game and also, even if he's not blocking, in the run game as well.
Yep. And of course, Noah Fant is no longer there, so the path has just been paved for him. And obviously, with DK and Lockett no longer there, there's tons of opportunity in the offense too that's up for grabs, and it feels like he's the one who's probably grabbing it. What about the running backs?
I think it's interesting because especially at this portion of camp, you start hearing about guys who are taking first team reps, and it's harder at the running back position, I think, to outlay if that makes a ton of sense as compared to, the wide receiver, the tight end position, where those guys probably are running different routes if they're wide receiver 3 versus wide receiver 1, where the running back is more of a rotation stable position. The one that I have kind of highlighted is Jaydon Blue with the Cowboys. Yeah. I think everything is indicating to us that the Cowboys want to run the ball. You look at last year's performance over the course of the season, 28th in EPA per rush. That is not Cowboys football. That is not how they succeeded. You think about Dak Prescott's MVP year where we thought the passing game was so potent. the running game was 8th in EPA per play. They were a very good running team. And even in 22, they were still above average. The Cowboys want to run the ball. I think that was a key item for Brian Schottenheimer coming in as the head coach. And that's why they brought in Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams as well. I just think that the early sound of it and the idea that they went and got Jaydon Blue, and also generally the Cowboys' success at drafting, indicates that Jaydon Blue may be at least a contributor in this offense, if not the top contributor by the time we're talking about this on Labor Day.
Yeah, I think because of the names that you mentioned of the veterans that they brought in, I think there will be opportunity for him to win that job for sure. So that one's definitely intriguing. And we could go on and on about different running backs there. That's a big one for fantasy drafts. By the way, just going back to Jaydon Blue from a fantasy draft standpoint, where would you put him in terms of like the rookie running backs? You're talking about being intrigued there, but how, far up the board and in conversation with other rookie running backs, like what kind of range would you feel comfortable drafting him based on what you just said?
I think it's tough because we did see Javonte Williams kind of eat carries throughout last year for the Broncos. And I think that it will probably be more of his role. Miles Sanders is really kind of a wild card that you're hoping can return to the form that the Eagles had him in. I think a lot depends on this offensive line. I think probably my projection of the Cowboys rushing offense this year probably is between the 15th and the 20th spot in the NFL, just based off of last year. So not a metric ton of upside in terms of efficiency, but if we start seeing that carry share in preseason, I think he can come kind of around a mid to late round guy, particularly given I think that is going to be the crux of that offense behind the rebuilt offensive line.
From a fantasy draft standpoint, a guy whose name I've seen moving up the boards lately is Emeka Egbuka, who intrigues me for a number of different reasons. Going into the draft, he was one of my favorite wide receivers in the draft, partially because of his specificity. Like, it wasn't a great wide receiver draft, but he was a guy who was very good specifically in the slot, right? Like, so if you're looking for a slot receiver, then he was by far and away the guy that you probably wanted to target in the draft. And I felt like when we were going through different teams and what I thought going into the draft, they might be looking for, what their offense could benefit from, there were a lot of teams that I thought specifically should go get a slot. And so Egbuka was one of those names that kept coming up for me that kind of put him in that category of like one of my favorite draft guys. Then he went to the Bucs, and I was like, well, I love that in some ways for depth and making a strength stronger, but I don't know that of all of the different places that I've been talking about that desperately needed slot receivers, if the Bucs were like my number one choice for him, because it's kind of clogged up with Chris Godwin, who they just spent a lot of money to bring back, right? So he's a priority. We know he's good. He plays primarily out of the slot, though he can kind of move around. And so I wasn't sure what it meant for Egbuka. I like the move in the long term, but not necessarily in the short term. So then we have Godwin dealing with an ankle injury, and so there might be some opportunity right out of the gate. I still don't know what this means for Egbuka in the short term, right? Like, I don't totally know, because I still have to believe that Godwin is the priority. And then does that mean that Jaydon McMillan isn't on the field? Does it mean that Godwin moves outside and Egbuka is in the slot? Like, I'm not sure. And this is the prime example of, and apparently he's looking good. And again, I told you one of the things I look for is when people volunteer information about people. Baker went on New Heights with the Kelsey brothers and volunteered his name specifically, Emeka's, in a question about what he was excited about for this year. He raved about him. He had detailed things that he liked. He talked about how he stayed grounded through the catch and what that meant for his yards after the catch potential. It just felt really very kind of like what made me aware of Puka his rookie year, when they're volunteering specific things and he kind of is finding ways to get on the field with those first teamers. But I guess I'm stuck in a like priors versus the new shiny object that we're all excited about and not knowing exactly how it fits in immediately. Because I still think that there is a chance that he is incredible, but isn't necessarily a guy who's on the field as much as an incredible rookie wide receiver typically would be. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And I think when you look at the discussion of the Bucs draft and frankly, the direction of their team, it's very interesting because we talked about Ted McMillan. That was a talent play. Even Elijah Arroyo, where he was drafted, there was just a lot of talent there. But with Egbuka, it's both the talent and the idea that we've seen him play the role that they need him to play. And so the way I'm thinking about this as someone from Louisiana is like, when you make seafood gumbo, you always make a little bit of chicken and sausage on the side in case, like, someone has a food allergy or you can't get crabs in at the right time or something like that. And that's basically what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did. Emeka Egbuka is the chicken and sausage gumbo. And I think Baker Mayfield is probably going to, get him a lot of seafood gumbo. He's going to get a lot of Chris Godwin if healthy. He's going to get a lot of Jaydon McMillan in his second year. He's going to get a lot of Mike Evans. There's going to be handing the ball up to Bucky Irving. But I wouldn't be surprised, as everyone kind of does, after, their first or second bowl of seafood gumbo, they duck into the chicken and sausage gumbo because it plays the role. And moreover, it's just good. And I think he's just a good player who has shown that he can shine alongside other good players, which is not really the case about some of these highly drafted wide receiver prospects.
So you think he probably has a big role this year?
I would view him as a really interesting spike candidate in fantasy. And from the team building side, I view him as a guy who can have excellent games should an older Mike Evans go down, Chris Godwin, who's coming off of a big injury, go down. And I think when you have the level of talent that they have, 2 excellent tackles, an excellent tailback, 3 really trusted wide receivers, you can just continue building out that, especially in a division where the 3 other offenses involve rookie quarterbacks, involve changes on the offense in the case of the Panthers, or like really rookie quarterbacks and changes on the offense in the case of the Saints. I think the Bucs are just going to try to outscore folks in their division.
Yeah, and that's why I keep drafting Baker in fantasy. Even if there is regression for him, because his numbers were a little bit insane last year, I just think that the offense is one that I'm so confident is going to move the ball and put up points.
I will note when it comes to the Bucs offense, though, I would not overlook the kind of notes that have come out about Tristan Wirfs. Like, it seems that he has an injury. It seems that there's things there. And I wouldn't be surprised if the regression comes not as a result of Baker or as a result of the wide receivers or the skill players. But we saw the Vikings last year when Christian Darrisaw went out, and particularly when Brian O'Neill went out at the end of the year, really struggle to move the ball and really struggle to keep it together. Tristan Wirfs is probably the best tackle in the league right now. That's going to be a big hole to fill, especially in the first couple weeks.
Absolutely. Very, very good point. One thing that I will say that is maybe signal for Baker being a good quarterback to handle that situation, and maybe not, is that last year he was one of those guys that specifically popped to me because of his time to throw and time to pressure. And the fact that his time to throw was generally kept right under the time to pressure, which tells me that he understands when the pressure is coming and how much time he actually has to get the ball out. So if the pressure is coming faster this year because Wirfs is maybe either not there or not who he once was for whatever reason, at least we have some signal that he can maybe handle that situation better than he has in years past and better than other quarterbacks in the league can.